Before we begin, I want to take a quick moment to share an important disclaimer. The information presented in this training is provided for educational and informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial, legal, or accounting advice. Every financial situation is unique, and the strategies discussed in this presentation may not be appropriate for everyone. In addition, debt settlement may have potential tax consequences. In some cases, forgiven debt may be considered taxable income by the IRS. Because of this, you should consult with a qualified accountant, tax professional, or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. By continuing to watch this presentation, you acknowledge that you are responsible for evaluating your own financial situation and seeking professional guidance when necessary.
Before we begin, let's be clear who this webinar is for. If your expenses went up, your income went down, your credit card payments are mostly covering interest, or your balances are barely moving, this webinar is for you. If you want clarity, options, and a real understanding of your numbers, you're in the right place. Now let's turn the attention to Mike Rodriguez, a 19-year debt relief veteran out of New York City. Mike has worked with thousands of debt relief clients throughout the span of his career to get them the relief you need. He's one of the most knowledgeable people you can contact to get relief from credit cards. Meet Mike.
Do you ever feel like your money disappears before the month ends? You're not irresponsible. You're not lazy. You're mathematically trapped. What if in this one webinar, I could show you exactly what your debt is costing you, not emotionally, but mathematically? Because right now you're missing opportunities, not because you're bad with money, but because your cash flow is locked up. So you cannot take advantage of investment opportunities. You hear about a stock that went up 250 times. If you had put $1,000 in Netflix in 2008, you would have about $250,000 today. Now, I'm not saying every stock does that, but here's the real issue. You never even had the $1,000 available to take the opportunity. You never had the $1,000 available to save for your retirement. Why? Because your extra money isn't sitting in your savings. It's going toward minimum payments. Before we dive into the numbers, before I show you your options, I want you to know who's talking to you right now. My name is Mike Rodriguez. For the past 19 years, I've worked in the debt relief and financial services space. But here's what that really means. It means I've sat across kitchen tables from families who felt embarrassed. I've talked to moms who were hiding credit card statements in drawers from their husbands and children. Moms who felt shame deep into their core. I talked to dads who felt like they failed because the overtime stopped. So they had to put basic living expenses on credit cards so that their families won't go without. I've heard the stress in people's voices when they say, "I'm making the payments, but nothing is changing. Get me out of this debt, Mike." Since March 2007, I've helped families refinance their homes. I've negotiated settlements personally. I've helped people eliminate credit card debt. I've built financial software to make the math transparent, and I've worked with some of the largest debt relief companies in the country to improve how they serve their customers. But what stayed with me wasn't the transactions. What stayed with me was the relief on their faces when they realized there's actually an easy way to make it. Most people aren't irresponsible. They're overwhelmed and they're underinformed. And they've never seen the full picture laid out clearly. Most people don't think strategically, they think tactically. That's why 40 million Americans feel they just can't get a handle on their debts. That's why I built this, not to sell you something, but to show you the math so you can make an informed decision about your own future. Now, let's look at your numbers. Let's go back to the stock market, for example, because when you hear about the 401k or the Roth IRA or retirement savings, you're hearing about the stock market. You're hearing about stocks that went up 250 times. You hear about someone who put $1,000 and years later, it's worth $250,000. You hear about the person that was putting away $500 per month And 20 years later, they have $1.5 million in their retirement savings so that they can retire comfortably. Today, you're hearing about the Trump accounts. Parents will be able to put $6,000 per year tax-free for their child. So when their child turns 18 or 21, they will have a step into the future that their parents never had. Now, I'm not selling you stock. I'm talking about what the credit cards are costing you. It's costing you your future and your family's future. The banks that you're paying, they're making a fortune off stocks. But what if you were the one who invested in these in 2008 instead of paying credit card interest since then? How would your life be different? But here's the real issue. You never even had the $1,000 available to take the opportunity. You never even had the $500 to put away every month towards your retirement. Why? Because your extra money isn't sitting in your savings, it's going towards minimum payments. And I call it the minimum payment tax. Not a government tax, it's a financial system tax. It's the silent drain that happens every single month. You pay $500, $900, $1,100, $1,400, but it doesn't even touch the principal, so your balances stay the same. It's just feeding interest. The banks are taking your money that you're paying as interest, and they invest that into the stock market, and they keep the additional growth of the market, which gives them more money to loan to you, to keep you stuck making minimum payments. And they just get bigger and bigger while your anxiety and stress grows larger and larger. It's a vicious cycle. And here's the part most people don't even realize. It's not even tax deductible. So if you're making money on payroll, if you are a W-2 earner, credit card interest on purchases is not deductible. That means you pay 22 to 29% interest. You don't reduce your taxable income. You absorb 100% of the cost. Even TurboTax explains it clearly on their site. Personal credit card interest is not deductible unless it's directly tied to legitimate business expenses. So the interest you're paying is fully after-tax money. That's what makes this so expensive. Before we move forward, take a moment to gather your financial information. If you don't already have your credit card statements handy, you can easily access them by logging into your credit card company's website or by using their mobile app or pulling out the paper statements if you receive them by mail. Having these statements in front of you is important because they clearly show your current balance, the interest being charged, and your required monthly payment. This information will help you get an accurate picture of where you stand and make informed decisions about your next steps. Now, before we continue, I want to be very clear about something. In this training, I'm not going to show anyone's personal financial information publicly. Your numbers are private. Instead, I'm going to walk you through an example scenario using a fictional person so you can clearly understand how the math works. So let me introduce you to someone we'll use as our example. Her name is Jane Smith. Jane is not irresponsible. She's not lazy. She's not someone who went out trying to get into debt. Jane is someone a lot of people watching this training will recognize because in many ways, Jane might look a lot like you. Jane is in her late 30s. She works hard. She may be married or raising kids. She's trying to keep everything running in the household. She pays the bills. She manages the groceries. She keeps track of the credit cards. And every month, she tries to make sure everything gets paid. At first, the credit cards were just for convenience. Maybe one was used for groceries, another for unexpected expenses, another when money got tight one month. And Jane told herself something many responsible people tell themselves: I'll pay it down later. But over time, something started to happen. A couple of unexpected emergencies came up that were outside of their budget. Jane's husband had some health issues, and some of the costs weren't fully covered by their insurance. There were doctor visits, tests, and other expenses that had to be paid right away. Some of those expenses ended up going on their credit cards. On top of that, he needed medications that had to be purchased over the counter, and those costs started adding up too. None of these were things they planned for. They were simply unexpected situations that many families face. And little by little, those balances started to grow. The minimum payments got bigger. And now Jane finds herself doing something that millions of hardworking people do every single month. She's making the payments, but the balance barely moves. And that's the moment when Jane starts asking questions like, how did this get so big? Why am I paying so much interest? Is there actually a way out of this? If you see a little bit of Jane in yourself, then you're exactly who this training was created for. Because what Jane is experiencing is not personal failure, it's a mathematical trap. And once you understand the math behind it, you'll finally see why so many responsible people stay stuck in debt for years, even while making their payments. All right, now that we've gathered Jane's statements, the next step is to enter the information exactly as it appears on the statements. This part is important. We're not estimating, we're not guessing, we're using the actual numbers directly from the statements because the math only works if the numbers are accurate. For each credit card, I'm looking for 4 things: the creditor name, the balance owed, the interest rate, the minimum monthly payment. Once we enter these numbers, we'll be able to clearly see what the debt is actually costing her mathematically. Let's go card by card. First card is Capital One. From the statement, we see the balance owed is $1,671.41. The interest rate is 28.74%. The minimum monthly payment is $59. So we'll enter that. Next is another Capital One card. The balance owed is $1,826.99. The interest rate is 28.24%, and the minimum payment is $60. Now here's a third Capital One card. The balance owed is $2,700.84. The interest rate is 28.24%, and the minimum monthly payment is $90. Next, we have American Express Business. The balance owed is $8,575.81. The interest rate is 26.74%, and the minimum payment is $321. Next is a Wells Fargo credit card. The balance owed is $4,985. The interest rate is 29.49%, and the monthly minimum payment is $180. Next, we have a Citi credit card. The balance owed is $3,400. The interest rate is 25.49%, and the minimum monthly payment is $170. Finally, we have the Home Depot card. When we look at the statement, we see something important. Right now, this balance is under a 0% promotional interest rate. Retail cards often do this. They offer 12 months with no interest when you make a purchase. But if we read the details on the statement, we see that once the promotional period ends, the interest rate jumps to 29.99%. So for the purposes of understanding the real cost of the debt, we're going to enter the future interest rate of 29.99% because if the balance is still there after the promotional period, and very often it is, that's the rate that it will apply. Now, there's another detail here. Right now, the minimum payment is only $72, but that's because the account is still under the promotional period. Once the promotional period expires and the interest rate activates, the minimum payment will increase significantly. Now that we've entered all of Jane's credit cards, we can finally step back and look at the complete picture. This is the part most people never get to see clearly, because when debt is spread across multiple cards, statements, and apps, the math stays hidden. But once we put everything in one place, the numbers start to tell the real story. Each bar represents one credit card balance, so you can visually see how Jane's $30,269 in debt is spread across the different cards. Now, this section shows what happens if Jane tries to pay off the debt on her own. At the top, you'll see that her current debt payments are using about $952 per month of her budget. We then compare 3 common ways people try to pay down credit card debt. The first option is just making the minimum payments. If Jane only made the minimum payments, it would take about 99 months. That's more than 8 years, and she would pay over $13,700 in interest. The other 2 methods you may have heard of are the snowball method and the avalanche method. These strategies involve using the same monthly budget, but focusing on paying the cards down in a specific order. Using these strategies, the debt could potentially be paid off in about 46 months, but Jane would still end up paying over $12,900 in interest. Now, there's something very important to understand here. All of these payoff timelines assume that Jane completely stops using her credit cards. That means no new charges at all while she's trying to pay this down. Because if new balances keep getting added, which is what often happens when someone is already financially stretched, then these timelines can extend even longer. What this actually means for Jane, at her current pace, she'll remain in debt for approximately 8.3 years and pay an estimated interest of $13,773. And that's if she stops using the credit cards at all. With a structured debt resolution strategy, she could reduce her debt and get out of it within as little as 24 to 48 months. Before I get into the debt resolution strategies, let's talk about making the minimum payments, because this is the option many people default to. So if Jane continues paying the minimums on her credit cards, the math looks like this. She would end up paying about $44,042 in total. And it would take about 8.3 years to finally eliminate the debt. Remember, Jane only owes about $30,000 today, so that means over time she would pay roughly $14,000 in interest alone. And that assumes she never adds a penny to the credit cards. But for most families, life keeps happening. Cars break down, medical expenses happen, kids need things. So while minimum payments technically work, they usually keep people stuck in debt for many years. The next option many people look into is personal loan consolidation. This is where someone takes out a single loan to pay off all their credit cards. The benefit is that instead of multiple payments, you now have one fixed payment. But there are a few challenges with this approach. First, many people don't qualify for the lower interest rates. In Jane's case, let's assume she qualifies for a loan around 14.9% interest, which is actually very common for unsecured consolidation loans. If she consolidates her debt into a 5-year loan, the total amount she ends up paying is about $43,000, and it takes 5 years to pay it off. So while this simplifies things, Jane is still paying over $13,000 in interest. And there's another risk with consolidation loans. Many people pay off their credit cards with the loan, but then end up using the cards again, which creates a second layer of debt. So while consolidation can help with organization, it often doesn't solve the root problem. Another option people sometimes consider is credit counseling programs. These programs work by negotiating with credit card companies to reduce the interest rates. For example, instead of 25 to 30% interest, the rate might be lowered to something closer to 8%. At first glance, that sounds like a big improvement, and in some cases, it can help people who have the ability to repay the full balance over time. But there are a few important things people need to understand about how these programs work. First, you still repay 100% of the debt. Nothing is reduced. So if Jane owes about $30,000, she still pays the entire $30,000, just with lower interest rate. In Jane's example, the total repayment could be about $35,470 over 4 years. So it's better than minimum payments or consolidation. But Jane is still paying thousands of dollars in interest. There are also some program rules people should be aware of. When someone enrolls in a credit counseling program, the credit cards are typically closed. They usually cannot open new credit accounts during the program. All payments must be made on time through the program. And if someone misses a payment, the credit card companies can cancel the reduced interest agreement. If that happens, interest rates can return to the original high rates, which can put someone right back where they started. So while credit counseling may help reduce interest, it still requires paying back the full balance. And that brings us to another approach that focuses on something different. Now let's look at what Jane's situation could look like using the DebtConquest approach. Remember, Jane currently has about $30,269 in credit card debt. And today, she's making about $952 per month in minimum payments. But this will increase by $200 after her 0% promotional offer expires on the Home Depot card. And the important thing to understand is this: a large portion of that payment is not reducing her debt. Because her average interest rates are around 25 to 30%, Jane is paying roughly about $700 every month in interest alone. So even though she sends the credit card companies $952 every month, the balance only drops by around $200 to $250 per month, which is why the debt could take more than 8 years to disappear. Now let's compare that to a structured plan. Instead of sending money into high-interest credit cards every month, the DebtConquest approach focuses on resolving the balances themselves. Based on Jane's numbers, the estimated settlement amount across all her creditors will be about $15,134.97. There are also program costs and administrative fees involved in managing negotiations and legal support. So let's discuss these. The debt resolution fee. This fee covers the work involved in negotiating with creditors, managing settlement agreements, coordinating the resolution process. For Jane's plan, the estimated debt resolution fees are $8,172.88. These fees are performance-based, meaning they are associated with successfully resolving the debt. Legal support. Jane's plan also includes legal support protection because sometimes creditors may pursue collections or legal action. This support provides guidance and assistance if legal issues arise during the program. And it also covers attorneys as well. This portion includes a monthly legal support fee of $54.99 per month. Over the course of a 48-month plan, that totals to $2,639.52. There's also a one-time legal enrollment setup fee of $349. There are special purpose account fees as well. So during the program, Jane's monthly deposits are placed into a dedicated special purpose account. This account is used to accumulate funds that eventually will be used to negotiate and settle the debts. The administrative fee for managing that account is $9.95 per month over the 48-month program, which totals about $477.60. When we combine all of those components, we get the total program cost. Let's break this down. The estimated settlements are $15,134.97. The debt resolution fees are $8,172.88. The legal support total is about $2,639.52. And the special purpose account totals to about $477.60, plus the one-time $349 legal setup fee. So the total estimated cost of the program becomes $26,423.05. Now, what this means, so instead of paying over $44,000 by continuing minimum payments, Jane could potentially resolve the debt for about $26,423, and she would be on track to become debt-free in about 4 years. Now, if Jane chooses a 4-year plan, her estimated monthly contribution would be about $541. Compare that to what she is doing today. Right now, she's paying $952 per month, but most of that money is going to interest. Under a 4-year DebtConquest plan, Jane would be about $541 per month, which is over $400 less per month than what she is paying today. And instead of the balance barely moving, she'll be on a structured path to eliminate the debt in about 4 years. Now, some people prefer to eliminate their debt faster. If Jane wanted to complete the program in about 36 months, her monthly contribution would be approximately $722 per month. Even at that faster pace, she would still be paying less than the $952 she is currently sending to the credit card companies. And instead of watching the balances barely move, she'll be on a path to becoming completely debt-free in about 3 years. So the real difference comes down to this. Today, Jane is paying $952 per month, with most of it disappearing into interest charges. Under a structured plan, she could choose between $541 per month for 4 years or $722 per month for 3 years. Both options move toward actually eliminating the debt instead of just servicing interest. Now, I want to be transparent about something. Every situation is different, and these numbers are estimates based on typical outcomes. And this approach is not the right solution for everyone. Later in this training, I'll explain who is this strategy best suited for and who should consider other options. But the question most people ask at this point is, how did this process actually work? Why would creditors ever agree to settle balances like this? And what does the process look like step by step? That's exactly what we're going to look at next. Before I walk you through exactly how structured settlements work with creditors, I want to show you something really important. You can actually get your own numbers for free. You don't need to fill out this intake form if you don't want to. Up at the top of the page, you can plug in your credit card balances, interest rates, and minimum payments, just like we did with Jane. And the calculator will immediately show you what your situation looks like mathematically. So if you're someone who just wants to understand the numbers, you're absolutely welcome to do that. There's no obligation at all. Now, if you want to see exactly what a structured settlement plan might look like for your specific situation, this form lets me send you a personalized breakdown. It only takes about 2 minutes to complete. And once you submit it, you'll receive an email that shows your estimated settlement ranges, your potential timeline, your estimated monthly payment options, so you can clearly see what the numbers might look like for you. And if you've already entered your credit card information into the calculator above this section, then when you fill out this form, the system will automatically include those numbers. That means the email you receive will contain a full breakdown of your situation based on the information you entered. Again, there's no pressure and no judgment here. Some people just want to understand the math. Others want to see what their actual path out of debt could look like. Either way, this tool is here to help you get clarity about your options. Now that you know how you can get your own numbers, let's walk through how the structured settlement process actually works with creditors step by step. The next question most people ask is, how does the structured debt settlement process actually work with creditors? So let me walk you through the process step by step so you can clearly understand how it works. So the first step is simply understanding your full financial picture. That includes things like the credit cards you have, the balances owed, the interest rates, the minimum payments, your monthly budget. Was it a financial hardship like an increase in expenses or a decrease in income, or both? This allows us to determine whether a structured settlement strategy actually makes sense for your situation. Because the truth is, this approach is not the right option for everyone. So the first step is simply evaluating the numbers and understanding your options. Step number 2 is create a structured plan. If the strategy makes sense for your situation, the next step is creating a structured plan. This plan outlines your estimated timeline, your monthly contribution amount, the order in which debts may be paid. So instead of continuing to send payments directly to credit card companies where much of the payment goes toward interest, the goal is to redirect your monthly contribution into a structured plan designed to resolve the balances. Now, one of the biggest questions people ask is, why would a creditor ever agree to settle a debt for less than the full balance? To understand that, it helps to understand how credit card industry works behind the scenes. When someone stops making payments on a credit card, the account eventually becomes seriously delinquent. Under federal banking regulations, credit card accounts are typically required to be charged off after about 180 days, or roughly 6 months of non-payment. This guidance comes from federal banking regulations such as the FDIC, Federal Reserve, OCC, and NCUA, which establish accounting standards for delinquent loans. Now, it's important to understand something. A charge-off does not mean the debt disappears. It simply means the bank must remove the account from its active loan portfolio because regulators consider it unlikely to be collected under the original terms. After an account is charged off, the creditor has several options. They may continue trying to collect the debt, assign the account to a collection agency, sell the debt to a collection buyer, and in many cases, portfolios of charged-off accounts are sold for a fraction of the original balance. For example, a $5,000 credit card balance might be sold to a debt buyer for a much smaller amount, like $500. Debt buyers purchase these accounts because they believe they may still be able to collect more than what they paid for the debt. So, for example, somebody buys your $5,000 debt for $500 and they collect $2,500 on it, they just made a 500% profit. And this is one of the reasons negotiated settlements sometimes become possible. From a creditor's perspective, receiving a lump sum settlement or structured payoff can sometimes make more sense than continuing a long and uncertain collection process. Now, sometimes people ask me a very common question, Mike, can I leave one of my credit cards out of the program? And the answer is yes, sometimes you can. But there's an important rule. The balance of that card needs to be 10% or less of your total credit card debt. The reason for that rule is strategic. When creditors review a settlement proposal, they look at your overall financial situation. If they see that you have a large portion of that debt you could realistically pay down on your own, they may assume you have the ability to pay everything on your own without the help of a structured debt settlement program. And when creditors believe that, they become much less willing to negotiate. So by keeping any card you leave out 10% or less of the total debt, it helps demonstrate that you truly need the structure of a settlement program for the majority of the balances. Now, let me show you something really helpful here. If a client decides they want to see what the numbers would look like without a specific card, we do that instantly. For example, let's say someone asks, Mike, what happens if I leave the Citi card out? All I have to do is click this little eye icon right here next to the card. When I click it, the system will temporarily remove that card from the calculation, and instantly you'll see your total debt change, your minimum payments change, and the entire payoff projection updates automatically. So we can immediately see how leaving that card out would affect the strategy. That way, we're not guessing, we're actually looking at the math in real time. And that's important because everything we're doing here isn't based on opinions, it's based on the math. Now, how settlements happen. During the structured settlement process, instead of sending monthly payments directly to the credit card companies, you begin contributing your monthly payment into a dedicated special purpose account. This account is set up specifically for your program and is used to accumulate funds over time that eventually will be used to negotiate and pay agreed upon settlements with your creditors. In other words, rather than continuing to make payments that mostly go toward interest, your monthly contributions are stored in this special dedicated account so funds can build up for settlement opportunities. As funds accumulate in the account, negotiations with creditors can begin. If a creditor is willing to resolve an account for a reduced amount, the proposed settlement terms are presented to you. You always have the opportunity to review and approve the settlement before payment is made. Once you approve the settlement, the payment is made from the dedicated special purpose account to the creditor, and that specific debt is resolved. The process then continues with the remaining accounts. Over time, debts are addressed one by one, and each settlement removes another balance from the list. until the enrolled debts are completely eliminated. I also want to be very transparent about something important. Under federal regulations governing debt settlement programs, no fees can be collected until a debt has actually been settled. That means the debt must first be successfully negotiated and resolved before any settlement fee is earned. So the service is performance-based, meaning the focus is on actually resolving the debts. Now, I want to be clear about something. Every creditor handles accounts differently, and settlement outcomes can vary depending on the creditor, the balances, and individual circumstances. That is why the first step is always evaluating your situation carefully and building a realistic plan. And now that you understand how the process works, the next important question becomes, who is this strategy actually best suited for? And just as importantly, who should consider other options instead? That's exactly what we'll look at next. Before we talk about who this strategy is best suited for, I want to share something that financial planners across the country are becoming increasingly concerned about. Right now in the United States, the average retirement age is around 65 years old, but something interesting has been happening over the last couple of decades. Today, about 1 out of 5 Americans over the age of 65 is still working. That's more than 11 million seniors who are still in the workforce after what used to be considered traditional retirement. Now, for some people, that's by choice. They enjoy staying active and continuing to work. But for many others, the reason is much more practical. Many people simply cannot afford to retire yet. Rising living costs, medical expenses, and in many cases, debt carried into later years of life make it difficult for people to stop working. And this is one of the reasons why understanding the true cost of high interest debt is so important. Because when debt continues for years, the interest doesn't just cost money in the present. It can steal years of financial freedom in the future. That's why the goal of a structured debt strategy is not just to lower payments, it's to help people eliminate the debt completely so they can move forward financially. Now, I want to show you something that most people never calculate. We've talked about the interest cost of debt, but there's another cost that's even bigger. It's called the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost simply means, what could your money be doing for you if it wasn't going to the banks? Look at Jane's timeline right now. Right now, Jane has about $39,269 in debt. If she just keeps making the minimum payments, it would take about 8.3 years to become debt-free. But using the structured plan we discussed, she could be debt-free in about 4 years. That difference is important because the sooner the debt is gone, the sooner that monthly payment can start working for her instead of the banks. Right now, Jane is sending about $952 per month to the credit card companies. But once the debt is eliminated, that same $952 per month could start going toward savings, investments, retirement, building financial security. So let's see what that could look like. Let's assume Jane invests that same $952 per month after the debt is gone. If she invested for just about 4.3 years with a modest return of 7% annually, you can see how the money begins to grow. Instead of interest working against her, compound growth begins working for her. But let's look at something interesting. Instead of saving for 4.3 years, let's change this number. Let's say Jane continues investing the same $952 per month for 20 years. Now look at what happens to the growth. You can see the line on the chart rise dramatically. The same monthly payment that used to go to the banks now becomes long-term wealth building. Now let's make one more adjustment. Instead of assuming 7% return, let's change the expected yearly return to 9%. Watch what happens to the total amount. Because when money compounds over time, even a small difference in return can lead to a much larger outcome. And now you can see how the growth accelerates even more. This is the part most people never calculate. The real cost of high interest debt isn't just the payments. It's the years wealth building that never happen. Years when money could have been going into investments, savings, or retirement. instead of going to interest. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about something important. Who is this strategy actually best suited for? And just as importantly, who should consider other options instead? This class is for you if you have credit card debt and it feels like it's controlling your life. You're making payments every month, but your balances barely move. Or you're trying to do everything right, but you feel stuck and you want a clear, logical plan instead of guessing. Or you prefer simple numbers over complicated advice. Or you don't want to be pressured or sold by aggressive debt relief companies. Or you just want to know exactly when you'll finally be debt-free. This class is not for you if you're already financially independent, or you carry no credit card balances, or you pay every statement in full each month. Or you're not feeling pressure from interest charges, or you don't care exactly when you become debt-free.